Thanks for coming. I'll be right with you. Just like that. That's how you do it. Those of you who aren't regulars here don't know how much I love to have a microphone in my hand. Even more so when I have a captive audience, so that's great. We've locked all the doors. So we're so glad that you guys have come today and to celebrate with us. You've now come to the time that you can relax. And so, guys and gals, loosen your ties if you want to. You can. Take off your jacket if you want to. Get comfortable. Turn off your cell phones, or just put them on airplane mode or something like that, and relax, because this is a time of celebration and a time of fun. One of the things that Jim always says is that church happens not in a vacuum. And so when we come together, we have good things and we have bad things and we have celebrations and we have difficulties. And he mentioned in the service, but I know there are some of you who were not here earlier, that Jody Smith's dog, McCoy, passed away over the weekend. And he's her seizure alert dog. And he's a member of our church, for those of you who don't know. I think he almost took communion one time. He's real close anyway. And so if you will be praying for her, and you can get her address from the church office and send her a note or card, and I know that she would appreciate that very much. Also, Dawn Edwards is not going to be here today. He very much wanted to play harmonica with Jim, but he is not going to be able to be here. So we will miss Dawn in playing the harmonica with Jim, and we'll do that another time. So I don't know that y'all are all invited to that, but you know, you can look into that. Also, I was looking over this, but I don't think that Jody and her friend Heidi were listed in this order of service, but they were in the other one, and obviously they are not here because of the passing of McCoy. Is still kind of trying to put that in place. So the thing about working with Jim is that, you know, you'll hear all the time. I mean, I heard before I even came here, oh, you were so lucky to be working with Jim McCoy. Oh my gosh, you are so lucky. I would love to work with Jim McCoy. Isn't it great working with Jim McCoy? Yeah. And you know, it is. I mean, he's great and all, but he's not perfect. And you know, a lot of y'all think he's just darn near perfect, and he's not. And he's not nearly as sad as he should be about leaving us. There have been I've not caught him in his office sobbing. I've not had to empty the trash can of tissues because he's just been so overcome with grief about no longer working with the best staff and preaching to the best congregation. No, none of that. In fact, he's been in such a big rush to leave that he cleaned out his office. And I went in there, naturally, because they give me a key now, you know, I have a key before. So I go on in, see what it looks like in there, and there are these messages that I guess he never returned all over the floor. And I picked up a few of them and thought I'd let you know what some of those messages were. It's crazy. So Jim, I don't know if you've got a pen, but you might want to write this down and return these. The Red Cross called, and you need to go and donate platelets. Now, some of you may not realize that Jim gets calls frequently from the Red Cross. Can I get an amen? Because he donates platelets, and so I can't prove this, but I think that his platelets must be just a little bit better than everybody else's because they call all the time for his blood. So call them back and take care of that, would you? AOL called, and that was dated 2000, so they're probably not an issue anymore, but they said that they could do your email for you, so that you'll get on that. Also, there was some paperwork in there about some parenting workshop that you were going to be doing, and I guess the speaker never got back to you, but Bill Cosby said that he is available, and he's more than happy to be the speaker for you for that. And the only other call that we had was, it was the Smithsonian, and they said, could they please get their flip phone back? So if you guys will stand, we'll sing hymn number 333. Join us in singing hymn number 333. Or is someone playing? Okay.
Now, can I just add a word that will considerably deteriorate the high quality of the meeting so far today? Jim called a couple weeks ago and said, I'd like for you to go to the piano, play the piano for a couple of hymns. His request, frankly, and Chuck Beatty, you may have to help us on this, he said, please make sure they sound as little white as possible on these hymns. And so, when I give the introduction to these hymns on the piano, I want you to be ready to sing. Now, you need to know, we had to change this at the last minute. Jim's first request was that great old Baptist hymn, Don't Come Home a-Drinking with Lovin' on Your Mind. And the only thing I know to say in addition to what a great hymn, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, is Jim and my friendship has been cemented around the kind of great quotes you heard from him this morning. And they range from the sublime to the ridiculous. The ridiculous is where I come in, and my favorite quote from Jim, and I want to share this with you today, it's in the Apocrypha, and it is, I ain't had this much fun since the hogs ate my little brother. So, with that kind of spirit in mind, would you join us in singing and moving whatever body parts are appropriate, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms.
Good afternoon. Daddy asked us to share a few words about growing up in the church as preacher's kids. You may be wondering to yourself, living with the pastor, how did they do it? Well, one aspect of support we sought out long ago was a group formed with other preachers' kids like us. Would the remaining members of the elite club Preachers Kids Supreme, or PKS, please stand at this time so that we may recognize you for your years of service to our organization. You may be seated, thank you. In preparing for this time of sharing, we thought that we would take the letters from FBC Weaverville to spell out for you some of our favorite memories from the past 20 years. F, fun times with the youth. Some of our best memories at FBC Weaverville came from the plethora of games learned in youth group. We will now demonstrate one of our favorites, which always reminds us of our dear friend, Jeremy Rice, king of Miss Mumble. Howdy, neighbor. Have you seen Miss Mumble? I don't think I have, but let me ask my neighbor. Neighbor? Yeah? Have you seen Miss Mumble? And Sarah would lose because she showed her teeth, so I'm the winner. All right. B. Baptist practices with Blake and Becca. We all know the importance of role models for those awkward teenage years. Fortunately, we had Blake and Becca Hart. We know that every youth meeting must include Blake prefacing his devotion with, "I'm going to play a song for you guys." Is a youth meeting really a youth meeting without a U2 song? We'll never know. We all know those people who like to skip out on prayer meetings. Well, Becca started me early when we skipped the inaugural prayer triplet meeting of 2004 to learn the closing dance scene from the movie Napoleon Dynamite. C. Communion bread, clogging, and candles. What do these three things have in common? Celia and Harold Payne. We'll let you in on a little secret. One of the perks of being a PK, that's Preacher's Kid, is you get to take home Celia Payne's homemade sourdough bread that has been used for communion. And if you were really lucky, Harold would let you blow out the candles on the altar at the end of the service. Another perk of being a PK is the multitude of babysitters. We always loved going to Celia and Harold's due to their provisions of sequined outfits and clogging shoes, so that Claire was able to make her clogging debut on their brick fireplace. Thank you. W. Without a thumb. Some of us find ourselves through athletics, others in our musical abilities. But for me, it was Bible drill, thanks to Martha Green. You are looking at the Bible drill champion who was still able to flip to Habakkuk in under 3 seconds, even with a broken thumb. E. Every year, Jim was a cowboy. There was always a little pressure when the fall festival rolled around. What new and creative costume would we come up with this year? A deviled egg? A table? Bubble gum under a chair? Jim never went through this creative process because pretty much every year Jim was a cowboy. A. Ann and Donnie Ramsey. Ann and Donnie Ramsey always knew the way to our hearts. Every birthday, they would gift us with a pack of 12 70-pound muffins from Sam's that brought us so much joy every morning for 12 mornings. And I'm sure lots of us remember the sweet taste of Ann and Donnie's homemade fudge, which would be gifted at any special occasion, especially potlucks. The very long games of capture the flag, youth lock-ins, where to begin? The nutritional meals, the abundance of sleep, the games that were all very safe, the hours of playing capture the flag that found Sarah standing on the second floor toilet for an hour so no one would see her feet. Yes, that is where we will begin and end. E, eating food our parents didn't allow us to eat. You have heard it said, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. But truly I tell you that when you go stay at Miss Claire Rector's house, she lets you put at least 3 spoonfuls of sugar on your Cheerios. Not only that, but Polly and Jack Rector made us peanut butter and marshmallow sandwiches for lunch. Not all our culinary adventures were sweet. We experienced biscuits and gravy for the very first time staying at Miss Ann Mathis's house. R, roller skating with Savannah Price and the Spice Girls. Some of you might remember the Weaverville establishment, Skate Around USA, but did you know the McCoys got their skating experience at Skate Around the Parsonage basement? Many a day we would trade off the only pair of roller skates we had, which were Little Mermaid, between the 3 of us, me, Sarah, and Savannah, while skating to the Spice Girls. B, VBS songs that will never leave us or forsake us. Amazon outfitters on expedition with the 1-2 guy. We will not be quitters. We're on a mission and we will not stop. We are truth trackers through holy chapters. We're gonna do our best, do what God says, and find the secret of the stone tablet. Admit to God that you are a sinner, believe that Jesus is God's only Son. Seek, commit your life to the Lord above, and ask Him to fill you up with His love. In the talent show every year. If the talent show sign-ups were looking a little sparse, guess who was automatically signed up? These guys. L, leading our own church services on snow days. Some of you may think that a snow day on Sunday means no church service. Not so in the McCoy household. We would act out every aspect of the service within our living room walls, while the only thing Jim and Jane had to do was come sit on the floor and listen to the children's sermon. We've never known where all of that offering money went. L, long prayers for naps. If we were to choose one adjective to describe the morning prayer, it would not be short. One of our favorite memories involves me sitting with Grandma O'Brien in the service and bowing my head during the morning prayer. After about, let's say, 5 minutes or so, Grandma O'Brien leaned over to Claire and whispered, not so softly, "Are you taking a nap?" E, for every gift, every hug, every handshake, every prayer, every encouragement, every card, every person, thank you for the tremendous blessing that you are to our family. And congratulations, Daddy, on your retirement. We love you.
Thank you, Sarah and Claire, for that touching, poignant memorial. Thank you. Just have to dry my tears here. That was beautiful, and now I'm wishing that my sister and I had done a similar thing when my dad retired from the pastorate many moons ago. But Jim's not just a pastor. He's also a musician. And this is really annoying to those of us who preach and can't sing also. I would hear after a particularly lovely service, I would hear one of the members in the congregation say, Jim, he's not just a good preacher, he's also such a good singer. And I'd go, okay, all right, I know. I don't sing. You don't have to underline it every single time. Jim plays all kinds of instruments, and I know that he would tell you this if he were the bragging sort, but among all of the things he plays, he also plays handbells. It's true. He actually subbed in handbells one time. And, he played those two notes really well. We were really impressed. And it's not everybody who can play handbells, although we are looking for a couple of spots if you're interested. Jim also plays guitar. And that has already been mentioned today, that he plays guitar. And what's interesting to me is that he has so many different interests in music. Like, he'll sing hymns, he'll sing gospel, he'll sing like James Taylor. But the song that I like to hear him sing the most is one that maybe Myrtle could sing along with him. I don't know the tune, but it's something like Old Aunt Maria jumped in the fire. Fire? Old Aunt Maria jumped in the fire. Fire too hot, jump in the pot. Go ahead. Sky too blue? Canoe too shallow? Tallow too soft? Loft too rotten? Cotton so white? Yeah, Jim likes Andy Griffith a little bit. And actually, he answers a lot of questions with song lyrics, which you may have noticed. I am not so good at that myself, although I did learn that while this all seems so natural to Jim, he just picks up an instrument and plays and sings songs so effortlessly. There's one instrument that he didn't play so easily right at the beginning. I know this because of our faithful secretary and friend, Joy Sprinkle, who testifies to the fact that when Jim got the bow to play the bass, that there were a number of times when she wasn't sure if there was murder going on in his office or if he was actually learning a song. And then she said one day she went by and she actually heard a song. And Jim said, "Yep, that was Amazing Grace." And Joy said, "It was amazing, all right."
Good afternoon. Being a minister, any occupation really, carries with it occupational hazards. My father has just celebrated 50 years of being a barber, and he can tell you about barber claw, that thing where you just can't pry your fingers open at the end of the day. Tennis players who are pros will tell you about their tennis elbow. And baseball players will tell you about many maladies. Being a campus minister requires navigating some things so you don't fall into occupational hazards. One of those is, as a campus minister, every day you get older. But your congregation of students, for lack of a better term, perpetually stays 18 to 22 years old. And they stay forever young. So to be a campus minister, and oftentimes a minister as well, to continue to relate to folks, you have to keep up with the technology, and you have to keep up with the music scene. The first time that I saw Jim McCoy, I was a college student at Western Carolina University. He had just stepped out previously from being the campus minister at Wingate University, but he was still making the rounds. I think he and Jane doing music at fall retreats and at midwinter retreats for different schools. And I happened to be at one of those. And I remember thinking to myself, watching him play guitar, I like that guy. I can relate to that guy. Fast forward a decade or so, and one of the pastors that I have the privilege to ask to start speaking every year at UNC Asheville's Baptist Student Union is that same man, looking unchanged by time and sporting that same old Martin guitar. I could see from the expressions on my students' faces and the interactions that they had with him and with each other that they too could say, I like that guy. I can relate to him. I remember the look of wonder on the freshmen in our group every year when Jim would come in, grab his guitar, and instead of starting out with an old traditional hymn, he would start jamming out the latest hit on the radio that every student had on their iPod or their MP3 player or whatever they had. I can remember one of them, he did John Mayer's No Such Thing. And the students, I had to pick their jaws up off the floor because they weren't expecting that. And he would then take the song and then weave it right into the scripture lesson for the evening and explain where the song applied and where it didn't apply. A few years ago, the week after Jim had come to speak and play for our students, about the time it was the time the girls were in college. I remember walking into the Student Center at UNCA a few days later, and one of the guys from our group was sitting on the couch playing guitar. He looked up at me, stopped playing, and proclaimed, I am going to marry one of the McCoy sisters. That's what he said. News to you, I know, new story for you. Taken aback, I said, well, have you picked one out? Because I don't think that's the best way to ask anyone out. Hey, girls, will one of you marry me? And he said, oh, I hadn't thought about that. It really doesn't matter. It'd just be really cool to have Jim as his father-in-law. So, Jim, to retain the honor of being cool to college students while you are the parent of college students is no small feat. And your gift in music and ability to take that which is secular and relate it to the sacred has been a gift God has given you that you have used well. And while you would always play them something that they would have on their musical devices, quite often you would throw in something that they didn't have, and that would be a classic from Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was a tune that was composed by Willie Welch, actually, originally, and covered several times. It's a lyrical parable that tells us a story of how those who are considered by the sports world to be the least among us can find a moment of greatness in God's economy, if by nothing more than taking our assigned place and waiting, sometimes impatiently, but waiting while the God does miraculous things. So, Jim, we dedicate this song back to you from all of us who have ever, in any sphere of life, felt that we were playing in right field. Was always a measure of my self-esteem, 'cause the fastest and strongest played shortstop and first. The last ones they picked were the worst. I never needed to ask, it was sealed. I just took up my place in right field. Playing right field is easy to know. You can be awkward, you can be slow. That's why I'm here in right field, watching these dandelions grow. playing right field can be lonely and dull. Little leagues never have lefties that pull, but I dream of a day they hit one my way. They never did, but still I would pray that I'd make a fantastic catch on the run and not lose the ball in the sun. Then I'd awake from this long reverie and pray that the ball never came out to me. Here in right field, it's easy to know. You can be awkward, you can be slow. That's why I'm here in right field, watching these dandelions grow. Well, off in the distance, the game's dragging on. The strike's on the bat, some runners are on. I don't know the inning, I've forgotten the score. The whole team is yelling and I don't know what for. And suddenly everyone's looking at me. My mind's been wondering, what could it be? They point to the sky and I look up above, and the baseball falls into my glove. Whew. Here in right field, it's important, you know. You gotta know how to catch, you gotta know how to throw. That's why I'm here in right field, watching these dandelions grow.
I need to first start with 3 apologies. You would think that the Episcopalian that they asked to read the gospel today would have remembered to ask you all to stand for that, but I think it was such the moment doing this for my good friend Jim McCoy that I forgot. So that's my first apology. My second apology, when Jim invited me to do this, was he said I had 4 to 5 minutes. It's going to take a few minutes longer than that. My second apology. And my third apology in advance is Jim said this is supposed to have the feel of a roast. It's about to, so I apologize for that. So I asked a couple of Jim's colleagues, since this was to be about his time at Wingate, and that was longer than the time we overlapped, I asked a couple of people who knew Jim well to send me a couple of Jim McCoy stories in the roast mode. And one of them is his good friend and our professor of English, John Sykes, who's here. John waves, because I want people to know who needs the credit for a couple of these stories. And the other was Bill Nash, who was a fellow Wake Forest alum, like the two of them. And Bill was our baseball coach, our dean of students. He's done a lot of things at Wingate. And the first story that Bill shared to me was that he picked Jim up from the airport when Jim came to interview for the Minister of Students job. So Dean Haskins, who was legendary at our university, sent Jim and a woman named Judy Childers in a Cadillac Eldorado to the Charlotte Douglas Airport to pick up Jim. They didn't know what he looked like, and so they held up a Wingate sign, and this folk singer, or what appeared to be a folk singer, wandered over with a guitar slung over his shoulder, wearing a corduroy sport coat, a very wrinkled yellow shirt, khaki slacks, and comfortable shoes. Remember, this was to be an interview for the campus minister, and these were proper Southern Baptists, so they had a different visual image of who should be getting off the plane. He said the conversation was a hoot on the way back. We reminisced about Wake. Obviously, Jim and I ran in different circles there. And so He had a number of rather official meetings arranged with Wingate holy people that night and the next day, and it appears that Jim had forgotten to pack a second shirt. I don't know about underwear or socks. I never bothered to ask. But that night after dinner, and I think he was staying in the guest house, Jim walked down the train tracks to the Wingate laundromat so that he could wash his yellow shirt. Good thing that it was a no-wrinkle brand, or so he believed. But in spite of that first appearance, Jim got the job, and we were all forever grateful. He said, but the thing I wish most is that YouTube had been in existence when at the university talent show, in Jim's wisdom, he thought it would be good for him and Jane to perform the Ray Stevens song, Guitarzan. Now, Jim and Jane dressed the part for this song of Guitarzan. Let me read you a few lines from Guitarzan, and please imagine in your minds Jim and Jane McCoy dressed as Tarzan and Jane performing this song. So can you envision that with me? He's free as the breeze, he's always at ease, he lives in the jungle and hangs by his knees. As he swings through the trees with a trapeze in his BVDs, he's got a union card and he's practicing so hard. Get it, get it, get it, I'm skipping. Guitarzan, he's a guitar man. He's all you can stand, give him a hand, Guitarzan. I swear it gets interesting. He's got a girl named Jane with no last name. Kinda homely and plain, but he loves her just the same, 'cause she kindles the flame and it drives him insane. When he hears her say she really does her thing, it's her claim to fame. Come on, sing one, Jane, baby, baby, oh baby, baby, oh baby. Again, keep the mental image. Loincloths, guitar. Now it really gets interesting. They've got a pet monkey who likes to get drunk and sing boogie woogie, and it sounds real funky. Come on, your turn, boy, sing one, monkey. Let's hear it for the monkey. On Saturday night, they need some excitement. Jane gets right and the monkey gets tight. And their voices unite in the pale moonlight, and it all sounds all right. Yeah, it's dynamite, it's out of sight. Let's hear it right now. Baby, baby, oh baby. I'm not sure that I'm more appalled by Jim asking Jane to do that or Jane agreeing to do that. I would really also like to ask Dr. Paul Court, Wingate's president at the time, what he thought about his campus minister's show, but we'll leave that for another day. So the next couple of stories come from his good friend John Sykes, and he put them in 3 categories for me. He said, my favorite Jim McCoy related story. Jim was driving late at night in the mountains listening to a gospel broadcast as was his wont. The preacher was railing against vanity. Quote, our nation is wallowing in worldliness. I see vanity everywhere I look, even in my own house. Why, my wife has more hair in her drawers than she's got on her head. Then he shared with me Jim's favorite joke. I read that joke, and I'm not going to share that joke, but just know it starts with an American walking into a bar in the Scottish Highlands and ends with a goat. I'll leave it there. And then there is the favorite Jim McCoy sermon when he was at Wingate Baptist Church. It was a sermon on Matthew 26:40. Could you not watch with me for 1 hour, was the scripture. Jim was preaching and explicating away. John writes that we're about 10 minutes in, and so Jim's trying to make it real. And Jim says, have you ever been so tired at the end of a stressful day that you just couldn't hold your head up any longer? Your body is finally still. The atmosphere is peaceful. You hear nothing except a familiar nearby voice talking soothingly. Your eyelids grow weary, heavy. Why, there's somebody up there on the second row of the balcony who feels that way right now. They all turn to look, and indeed, dead asleep on the second floor of the balcony listening to Jim's sermon. Lastly, my relationship with Dr. Jim McCoy. Jim had responsibility, in addition to his ministerial duties, to oversee a program at our college called Lyceum. And it was our worship service, it was arts events, it was academic lectures, and we had to have so many Lyceum credits to graduate. And if you fell short of your Lyceum credits, you had to see Dr. McCoy. And he had to give you an assignment to make those credits up because you couldn't graduate without it. And so Jim decided, in Jim's way, that if you were the kind of slacker who was going to do this, then he was going to try for you to learn something to make that work up. So he created a course called a World Hunger Seminar. And so he would have these poor students. This was not the best of the best or the brightest of the bright. He would have them come and spend an hour each week exploring a different aspect of world hunger. And so typically in a semester, he would have about 10 students who would take this seminar on world hunger. But I think because Jim is an optimist, he always hung signs up around campus hoping that somebody would just voluntarily take the class. I voluntarily took the class. So when he went around the room and he was reading the roster, he looked up at me and he said, "Why are you here?" "I know why your 6 compatriots are here, but why are you here?" And what started then was a friendship that meant the world to me and made me the person that I am today. Because let's just say that the circles I moved in at Wingate were not the circles that most students moved in who knew the minister to students. That was not really my crowd. But thankfully for me, I'm not sure that was Jim's crowd either. And we were perfect for each other, and I am so glad I signed up for that course. It led to Jim offering me my first job at Wingate University. I did not have an idea of what I wanted to do, and so he invited me to stick around for a couple of years until I figured out what I wanted to do with my life and help him start a volunteer service organization for students. We had been inspired by this national movement called COOL, Campus Outreach Opportunity League. And so after I had made the decision, and again, I was not the type of student that, again, the leadership of the university at the time thought would be appropriate for me to be working with the campus minister on volunteer service issues, but Jim was influential and he convinced them to hire me anyway. So that summer before I'm starting, he and I are together and we're meeting and we're trying to come up with an acronym like COOL, something that's going to be good, that's going to sell what we're doing to students. And so I'm coming up with all of these words, and Jim's calling out the first initial, and we're trying to come up with something like COOL. We ended up settling on UCAN, University and Community Assistance Network. But that night I was thinking, I know, Students United for Community Service. And Jim goes, SUCS. I think you're going to need another one. So the other night, before coming up here, I was sharing with John how much I appreciated his stories that he shared with me. And I was talking to him about how important Jim was to me and my life and who I have become. And so he sent me this email last night, and I will conclude with this. These are John Sykes' words that I'm reading. When you were talking about your callowness during your student days, by the way, I had to look up and make sure I knew what callowness meant, and it was the perfect word. That's how Jim and John are. They know words like that. When you were talking about your callowness during your student days, I remembered a saying Jim used to repeat. It comes from Tom Lowry, father-in-law of Jerry Thomas, former Union County school superintendent and a longtime member of the choir at Wingate Baptist Church. He and Jim both sang tenor, so they often sat together in choir practice. And Tom used to say, "You can never tell about a wormy calf." You can never tell about a wormy calf. John writes that we didn't know exactly what it meant, but Jim loved it. He said, John writes, "I took it to mean something like," and he's speaking for Jim, "sometimes people turn out a lot better than you think they will." So I'm grateful for Jim McCoy taking an interest in this wormy calf. Thank you.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home. Such a long, long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long way from home. Such a long, long way from home. Swing low, sweet chariot. Swing low, sweet chariot. Swing low, sweet chariot. A long way from home. Such a long, long way from home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Such a long way from home. Such a long, long way from home.
It's been a real pleasure in my life to participate in some of the musical adventures that Jim and I have had, to see the breadth of his musical interest. I didn't think I'd find anybody in my life that would have as much passion around Lester Roadhog Moran and the Cadillac Cowboys as Jim, or folks like that. So I didn't know about your Ray Stevens. There's another connection we have. So when Jim asked us to play, I said, can you give me a favorite hymn or something we could play? And he couldn't come up with it, so I said, well, we'll just do a medley. So we're going to do 12 hymns in about 20 seconds. It won't take that long to do the 12 hymns, so I needed to fill up the time. So I thought Jim is a very literate kind of guy, so I'm going to throw in a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And since Lester Roadhog Moran didn't win the Nobel Prize, we have to throw in a little bit of Bob Dylan. Y'all can sing along. Your part will be easy. Ooh wee would be your part to sing, but you can sing the rest of the lyrics if you want. But come in strong on the ooh wee. I just think, I'm sure they gave Bob Dylan the Nobel Prize for Literature because who else could write a lyric that says Genghis Khan and his brother Don? I just think it's a great line. 12 hymns. Clouds so swift, rain's falling in. Gonna see a movie called Gun to the Inn. Pack up your money, put up your tent in the wind, 'cause you ain't going nowhere. Ooh-wee, riding me high. Tomorrow's the day that retirement's gonna come. Ooh-wee, old Jim's gonna fly down into his easy chair. Genghis Khan and his brother Don could not keep on keeping on. We'll climb that bridge after it's gone. After we're way past it. Means a lot, doesn't it? Really deep. Love those lyrics. Ooh, tomorrow's the day that retirement's gonna come. Ooh, old Jim's gonna fly down to his easy chair. Ooh-wee, riding high. Tomorrow's the day that retirement's gonna come. Ooh-wee, old Jim's gonna fly down to his easy chair.
Now it's my turn again. When Jim came in 1997, Princess Diana had only just passed away. The movie of the year was Titanic. That was the Oscar winner that year. This year, it was a little different Oscar winner, either La La Land or Moonlight, whichever you want to go with. When Jim came as pastor, Nemo hadn't even been born yet, much less gotten lost and met somebody named Dory who later got lost. Shelby Spivey was a newborn, and Peyton and Patterson Young were 4 years old. Claire and Sarah were grade schoolers, and Brian Crawford was 8 years old. The chair of the deacons back then, I believe, was Betty Hughes. Am I right? Betty Hughes was the chair of deacons. And the choir included Irene and Dawn Edwards, and Alta Edwards, and Geneva Cheek. And the administrative assistant was Joy Sprinkle, just like she is now. And that part, that's just, some things never change around here. Jim, you've been here through good times and bad. You were here in this pulpit when the tragedy of Columbine happened. That was back when the phrase school shooting was brand new. You were here on September 11th, when everything we knew to be real was suddenly different and unsteady. And yet you were here, steady and sure. You were here in 2004 when a tsunami wiped out hundreds of thousands of people, and when hurricanes hit in Haiti and later in Mississippi. You were here, guiding this congregation through difficult times. But as you have said many times, church doesn't happen in a vacuum. We had our own losses as well. We've lost loved ones, we've lost spouses and friends. Jeremy Rice passed away, always an earth-shattering event for a congregation when a member of the youth group dies. But Jim was here. And even just recently, when Jason Briggs, who blessed us with his angelic, wholesome presence, slipped quietly away, you were here. We can count on you. We know that we can always count on you. And so we are a little scared right now because, as Joy put it recently, she said, you know how when they do that magic trick and everything's set on the table just right and somebody comes along, they pull that the tablecloth out from under it and everything just stays still? That's not going to happen when Jim leaves. It's going to be like they pull the rug out from under us and we all just fall and get broken. It does kind of feel like that. I've told people that one of the reasons that I came to work at First Baptist Church of Weaverville was because people said, have you even met Jim McCoy? He is such a great leader in our community. He's a bridge builder. Do you know about the work he does with the African American community? Do you know about the programs that he is involved with in this community? And I thought, come on, I need a job. I'm going to take the job. I mean, come on, there can't be a boss this perfect for me. You got to be pulling my leg. And yet, he absolutely was. And what has amazed me is that Jim has not just met all of my expectations, what all of those good, well-meaning friends of mine said. He's gone beyond that, and he's done something for me that no other pastor has done. And that is, he said to me willingly, how often do you want to preach? You can preach. Sure, you can preach. And so once a month, I've had the opportunity to preach and to learn myself this skill that he has already mastered so well. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your leadership. I'm grateful for your sense of humor that keeps us laughing. But mostly, I'm grateful for the way that you've shown me how best to be a pastor and how best to lead. Thanks, Jim.
She was 6 years old when she was blinded by an act of medical malpractice. I don't know how you would have responded. I have some idea how I might have. I don't think I would have responded by writing, among other things, "Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine." I don't think I would have written the other hymn Jim has requested, but I'm so glad she of the quaint name, Fanny Crosby, wrote this hymn. It sounds to me like a hymn that could have been Jim McCoy's theme song. He never simply passed people by on the street. You've heard it a gazillion times today. This hymn describes, I believe, his heartbeat. And so let's sing it gently with a slight little southern swing, but prayerfully, and think about this man and his ministry as we sing, "Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior." Because of you, Jim, because of you, a lot of people could say, no, the Savior did not pass me by. He looked and he sounded like Jim McCoy, and he stopped for me.
Jim, I've been kind of wondering why you asked me to speak from the church and the community. We've been good friends these last years. You've been in some groups that I've led. But I think now I know why. I'm 82, I'm a retired pastor, and you wanted an example of some life after retirement. That there is that possibility out there. So I now know why. I've loved this day. You all have done such a wonderful occasion. The church and the worship and oh my, it's been there's been celebration, there's been inspiration, there's been humor, there's honesty, some vulnerability. I must admit, like you, Eileen, I've been with Jim enough, and I just resent his ability just to pick up and sing and capture stuff. And remind me how envious I was of Mel Williams. Some of you know Mel Williams. He was a close friend of mine, and he would sometimes just, maybe you do, just move out into song in the middle of a sermon. And I just felt so envious of that, so I'm glad I can admit that today. And then the vulnerability of having your kids come up and talk about God. I don't think I'd have that security, so I admire that as well. So, Jim, welcome to the longevity revolution. It's pretty amazing. This is the first time in history, first time in evolution, that you get to be 65. How old are you? 60. All right, that fits. You get to be that age, and you can reasonably say, I could live for 2 or 3 more decades, maybe 4. And that's never been the case. So I'm going to be fascinated about what story you're going to live out of coming up. I know it's going to be Easy Rider, and I know it's going to be, what is it? You're going to be bold to be wild, or born to be wild. And so it's going to be fun to watch how that gets lived out. Because the scripts, the stories of aging are not too inviting, that we inherited. You're put out to pasture, means we don't want to hear from you anymore, and you don't have anything to contribute. Or I've worked hard, and I'm going to play. That doesn't work very well. I can't see you doing that. Or I'm going to work like I've always worked till I drop. Hope you don't choose that one. So you've had job descriptions as a parent, as husband in some sense, and certainly as a pastor and campus minister. There's no job description for aging. So you get to write the script, really. And you get to decide the kind of story you're going to live out of. You and I had got some conversations leading up to your retirement. And I can't remember all that went into that. When was it time? Because we have that freedom. And I don't think you asked me what led me to decide to retire from my last church. If you had, I think I'd had to tell you what kind of precipitated it. I at that time had an associate, Nancy Petty, who's now is the senior minister there. And after one meeting, she leaned over to me and she said, a committee meeting, she said, "You need to zip up." And I thought, oh, I was so embarrassed, for my associate that to remind me my pants were unzipped. And so a couple of months later, the same thing. Zipper. And I thought, oh, God, I was so embarrassed. And then about 5 months later, it happened again. man, you need to zip up. I said, it's time to retire. When I can't handle that very basic obligation. So it wasn't very spiritual, but that's when it started going. I believe it's time for you to let this go. All right, in terms of speaking about the church and community, it's all been said. In terms of pastoral care, that yarn story, you just got endless capacity to care for people, love for people. That yarn is not ever going, and that's going to continue. My grandson, I asked him, we were talking about things the other day, he's 21, and he says, I just feel like a ball of love. I said, golly, it took me 82 years to feel that may be who I really am. But you are. You just love people. You just care. So that's been named, the pastor, the priest being that mediator, that helping people connect with the sacred, whether it's in worship or in groups or personal relationships or pastoral care. We celebrate that gift. It's been celebrated today. The prophet, such passion for justice. And in terms of the community, since I've been here, I try to show up in lots of various efforts to impact social change, right justice, shalom. And invariably, in every meeting I go to, and I don't go to, of course, all of them, there's Jim. He's always there. He's just showing up. Doesn't usually raise his hand, but he's present. And he's willing to speak, but he doesn't have to speak. But showing up in these interracial meetings or the Islam community, a lot of us gathered there after the election to give support to the Islamic folks, our friends. I look around the crowd, there's Jim. So in the community, you are a bridge builder. You have been, you will be, that's what you're going to do, it's who you are, and that's going to be a part of these years coming. So all that's been named so well. The last thing I'd say, there's a word for a minister that doesn't get used anymore that I'm aware of. We've talked about priest, we've talked about pastor, we've talked about prophet. Parson. You ever hear a minister called parson? Well, that means person. And I thought of that in regard to you, Jim. You're priest, you're pastor, you're prophetic, but underneath that, you're parson. You're a person, and an authentic person. And that's at the heart of why we celebrate you, I think. That scripture this morning that Jesus spoke not as the scribes and Pharisees. He spoke as one who has authority. And I think that's the authority of personhood, a kind of authentic presence, caring person. Now the job changes in all these transitions, but that doesn't change. But I think, when I think of you, I think of parson, a kind of person. Alice Walker wrote this, and I thought of you and I thought of this quote. I believe people exist to be enjoyed. Where I am in the presence of another human being, I want to revel in their creation and intellectual fullness, their uninhibited warmth. I want the precious human radiance to wrap me in the light. A certain kind of person to be enjoyed. So I changed it slightly. I believe people exist to be enjoyed. where I am in the presence of Jim McCord, where we are in the presence of Jim McCord. I want to revel in his creation and intellectual fullness, his uninhibited warmth. I want the precious human radiance to wrap me in the light. I believe that's who you have been, who you are, and who we will enjoy your existence fully in the future. Thank you for the privilege to be with you today.
In this morning's worship service, it was amazing to hear Jane sing in that duet, that classically trained voice, and just to imagine how they've made music together with that voice and with Jim singing Guitar Zen and things like that, and all of his rock and roll love. So with that kind of as an inspiration, their marriage of their music, we wondered, Kim and I, what would have happened if Aaron Copland had been a member of Leonard Skinner. So.
Jim. That's how we've greeted each other for a number of years. I'm not sure why, it just kind of started that way. And of course, I say Jim, he says Bill. It's not like we'll say Jim. Trying to think about how to capsule 18 years that I've been here and 20 years of Jim's ministry. I figured the best way to do it is just to think of some highlights and just kind of let my mind wander about the things that just jumped out as I was just reflecting. And the first thing that I want to reflect on, or that just jumped out at me, was the sermons. Especially over the last year, top-notch sermons that taught me a lot. And just over the past year, I think about every Sunday was a great sermon. Finally, after So I don't appreciate that Jim's just now hitting his stride and now he's retiring. But a second thing that popped into my head was could be headline: Pastor invades women's bathroom. This was not an act of social activism. It was a group of men had gone to a baseball game in Atlanta. Myself, Jim, Paul Price, Dale Spivey. On the way back, we stopped off at Bass Pro Shop. And I know many of you are thinking they really know how to party, but we stopped in there, and Jim had to go. So, but the other three of us watched in horror as he walked right into the women's room. And I mean, he was in there long enough for the door to close, so I don't know how long it took him to notice where he was. But the other three of us were, and I can't speak for Dale and Paul, but I was caught somewhere between wanting to melt into the crowd and pretending I didn't know him, or when he came out, grabbing somebody and say, he's a plumber. But we didn't. And I don't even know why that sticks in my head, but it's just a really humorous moment. Another thing that I think of is Ernest T. Bass. How many have pastors that can have the world's greatest impression of Ernest T. Bass? In fact, I'm often wondering if it is an impression. Have you ever thought that perhaps Ernest T. Bass is impersonating Jim McCoy? This has occurred to me many times. That song earlier is of Anne Mariah, a very good example. The last humorous story I want to tell is a number of years ago, our dear wives, Myrtle and Jane, gave us tickets to the Yankees game, last year of Yankee Stadium. So we got to go to a couple of games before they tore it down. And unfortunately, Jim was in charge of the arrangements, and so for hotel or lodging, if you could call it that. So we stayed at this place called St. Leo's, which I guess was a convent or something, because there were nuns there, and they were very nice. But we checked into the room, and there was this bed, one bed, two men. Supposed to be a double, but I'm not sure it qualified. Very narrow. So we did what I thought men would do. One of us slept under the covers, and the other slept on the top. And then the next night we switched it. So Myrtle's thoughts on this is, men are so stupid. But there's a man code, and you really shouldn't break it, and so we do. You have to come up with your own sleeping with the preacher joke. I'm not going to go there. This is supposed to have the feel of a roast, but there are a few things I feel I must say, if I can. The darkest day of my life was when my wife Lisa died, my first wife, Molly's mom. The wise counsel that Jim provided, the calmness, you've heard about that from others here this morning, but I could have made it through without what Jim provided me with during that time. And then just a few short months later, Molly's baptism. Just as a quick aside, I love the way we do baptisms here. Jim, we do them right. I would recommend the rest of you might want to consider being rebaptized and come back and have Jim baptize you. The way we do it is the way it ought to be, personal and a meaningful time for that person and that person's family. But then time after that, conducting the wedding of myself and Myrtle, I feel like I've lived 2 or 3 different lives just in the time I've been here. And so Jim probably thinks I've been in a lot of trouble, but thank you for all of those, for seeing us through those. Other difficult times that I could mention, but I won't. But just know that everything you've heard from others about Jim being a caring and sensitive and wise individual, it's all true. He has the ability to make those special moments seem like they really are special. All those great Christmas Eve services that we have, Easter Sunday, weddings and funerals. it's not just a practice or a thing he does because he's a preacher. I always felt it's real, and that's one of your great gifts. Another one that I would mention, the gift of conversation, of actual dialogue. To me, that's a lost art today. But Jim is one of those, when you talk to him, you don't feel like he's waiting for you to finish so he can speak. He listens to what you say, and you get a chance to listen to what he says. But it's a two-way conversation, and I find that refreshing, and I always look forward to a conversation with Jim because I know it'll be a dialogue. And then finally, you've heard this many times. Well, one other thing. Just to show what kind of person he is, years ago I was a big Tennessee football fan, I was headed to a game and I wrecked my car. I wound up on the side of the car in the ditch, and they towed the car back home, and for some reason I called Jim, and I can't remember why, but he offered to lend me his car so I could still make it to the game. What kind of a person loans their car to somebody who just wrecked their own car? So obviously this man is crazy, but what kind of a person does that? Jim McCoy's kind of person. And finally, his compassionate heart for all those who are on the margins or who are in difficult stations in life, those to whom it's not necessarily easy to minister to, those to whom it's not necessarily popular to minister to. Jim's got a heart for all of those people, and he's been an example for our church, for me personally. So thank you for that example. In closing, I just want to say I know that this was supposed to be a roast, and so I told a few stories, but I really just couldn't leave it at that. There's a lot more to Jim McCoy than just that. There's a whole lot. And I'm grateful, feel like I'm a better person for having known and served alongside and just hung out with Jim McCoy. So Jim, thank you, and God bless you.
Left to my own devices, I would lose my way, quit my job and lie in bed all day. Or I might get so ambitious, I neglect the ones I love, ignore the world around me, forget what God has done. I need a rhythm to live by, time for work and worship, rest and play. I need a rhythm to live by, time to stop and let the Spirit have its say. Help me find the balance I was made for from the start. I need a rhythm to live by, so my feet can keep the beat of my heart. There's a pattern to the seasons, like the dance of day and night, and every living thing makes peace with time. But I struggle in my freedom, like a drowning man, for air, for a mission of communion, for a Sabbath and a prayer. I need a rhythm to live by, time for work and worship, rest and play. I need a rhythm to live by, time to stop and let the Spirit have its say. Help me find the balance I was made for from the start. I need a rhythm to live by, traveler's way. Follow the high road and look for me there. Take bread for the journey and strength for the fight. Comfort to sleep through the night. Wisdom to choose at the fork in the road. And a heart that knows the way home. Take bread for the journey and strength for the fight. Comfort to sleep through the night. Wisdom to choose at the fork in the road. And a heart that knows the way home. And for the faithful and for the weak and for the hopeful, here is my prayer. Go in peace, live in grace, trust in the arms that will hold you. Go in peace, live in grace, trust God's love. Go in peace, live in grace, trust in the arms that will hold you. Go in peace, live in grace, trust God's love. Love, oh may this love be in our hearts forever. Take bread for the journey and live for the fight. Trust in the arms that will hold you. Wisdom to choose at the fork in the race, and a heart that knows the way home. Go for the journey and live the fight. Trust in the arms that will hold you. Wisdom to choose and live in grace. Trust that God's love. And for the faithful and for the weary and for the on your way, traveling mercy to you. Be on your way, traveling mercy to you. Take bread for the journey and strength for the fight. Comfort to sleep through the night. Wisdom to choose at the fork in the road. And a heart that knows the way home.
Of the thousands of things I would like to say, I want to say that I remember that night at the Blues Brothers premiere, and Juanita Greer was sitting beside Melba Buckner of blessed memory, and Melba said, "Juanita, I recognize Mr. Kenyon, but I do not know that other man." And Juanita said, "Melba, that's Dr. McCoy." And Melba, I don't think Melba ever got over that.
Have you wandered away from your Father's care? Heavy-hearted and sad do you roam? There's a sweet, gentle voice calling now to you. Wandering child, oh come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Wandering child, why longer roam? 'Tis thy Father entreats. Wandering child, oh come home. Is your frail bark adrift on life's raging sea? Are you tossed on its billows and foam? There's a safe harbor home waiting now for you. Wandering child, oh come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Wandering child, why longer roam? 'Tis thy Father entreats. Wandering child, oh come home. He is pleading today, heed his gentle voice as he bids you no longer to roam. To that dear Father's house, haste without delay. Wandering child, oh come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Wandering child, why longer roam? 'Tis thy Father entreats. Wandering child, oh come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Child, come home. Wandering child, why longer roam? 'Tis thy Father entreats. Wandering child, oh come home.
I've chosen as my text for this closing word the Gospel according to Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot sounding very much here, I think, like Jesus of Nazareth. Gordon Lightfoot giving advice that all these years since Betty and I and then our children and we have seen Jim McCoy live out. So Jim, not a roast. I have not come to bury this pastor, but to praise him. Go first in the world. Go forth with your fears. And remember, a price must be paid. Be always too soon, be never too fast, at the time when all bets must be laid. Beware of the darkness. Be kind to your children. Remember the woman who waits. And the house you live in will never fall down. If you pity the stranger who stands at your gate. The pulpits of American Protestantism have all too often been filled by shallow, preening people of bluster, ambitious, mischief makers, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Jim McCoy does not bluster. Jesus has all the best lines, including, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. But Southerner Flannery O'Connor came behind him and said something every good pastor knows. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd. Thank you, Jim, for your courageous surrender to this odd summons. Some folks pursue the calling of pulpit and pastorate. Thank you, Jim, for allowing yourself to be pursued by that calling. Or, more to the point, to be pursued by the searching eyes of that lonely Galilean on the cross. Thank you for being my friend and my pastor, for loving me enough to hear my halting confessions when the demons of doubt were circling, and for summoning on occasion the fiercest form of a grace-filled friendship that spoke candor to me when I least wanted to hear it. Thank you, Jim, for having the parents you did, the sister you do, those folks that knew you best and have loved you the most and who shaped you and loved you from infancy and before. And thank you, thank you, thank you, Jim, for having the uncommon good sense and providential good fortune to choose Jane as your life partner. For blending your voices and your souls in a timeless duet that has blessed all of us and modeled a seamless harmony, a life concert whose greatest gift to the world is Claire and Sarah. Thank you for providing your front porch on Church Street as a sanctum sanctorum, a holy of holies, where across the years and as recently as last night, you have provided a safe shelter from the storm and a healing, music-laced balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. Thank you for always being there to pity all of us, strangers, in this room. And personally, again, thank you for pitying this stranger who stood at the gate. This week, as I was going through old files myself, again and again I came across missives from Jim McCoy, and they ranged, oh how they ranged. Sometimes it would be a bright word from an emerging New Testament scholar, Luke Timothy Johnson, warning about how we as a culture were becoming more and more stratified, warning about the dangers, as Jim knew I faced, of ministering in a university community where we weren't very careful we would forget that there is finally real truth and what his voice sounded like. At the other end of the spectrum, there were comments Jim would remember. Jim McCoy remembers everything he ever heard. You know that, don't you? He can quote all of you. Pray he doesn't, but he can. Some of those notes had jokes I wish I could share with you, but I couldn't possibly in a sanctuary of a church. But then this word from Teaching a Stone to Talk by Annie Dillard. This has to do with the foolishness of preaching. A high calling, which for a man of Jim's essential gentleness and honesty was far more of a challenge than for some mere words merchant, some glib purveyor of entertainment. And so, Jim, you will understand, I guess this is why you sent it to me, so that we together could take comfort in the foolishness we practice. This is what Annie Dillard says about Christian worship on most Sundays. Week after week, we witness the same miracle, that God is so mighty he can stifle his own laughter. Week after week, we witness the same miracle, that God, for reasons unfathomable, refrains from blowing our dancing bear act to smithereens. Week after week, Christ washes the disciples' dirty feet, handles their very toes, and repeats, as your ministry has repeated, to 1,000 people who can't be here today to bear witness to it, Jim, has repeated as Christ would say, and as Jim has said to all of us, it is all right, believe it or not, it is all right to be people. On my last birthday, Jim sent me a book. I close with words, just 4 lines from this book of free verse by John O'Donohue, calling To Bless the Space Between Us. Jim, on page 167 of O'Donohue's little tome, is this word about retirement. I left just these 4 lines. His words to you, my words to you, the words of all the saints, many of them here, many of them who from their labors rest now, but for whom you were the presence of Christ. From all of us to you, have the courage for a new approach to time. Allow it to slow until you find freedom. Freedom to draw alongside the mystery you hold and befriend your own beauty of soul. The house you live in is a house not made with human hands, Jim. The house you live in, the gospel you have proclaimed, will never fall down. We love you, and God bless you. As Jim said, close with a prayer. Suppose we could do that. But you've heard enough from preachers and prayers today. Thought it might be much more like Jim and Jane and the girls if we asked them just to come up here. We'll all stand, and we're going to form a big old circle. Don't worry, your buses will wait. It'll take just a moment. Just a big old circle with Jim and Jane and the girls. Josh right here. We'll think of Caleb out there in California. We're going to make as big a circle as we need to. We're going to join hands, and then we're going to sing the first verse and the last verse of what is known as the Baptist National Anthem, Amazing Grace. Would you stand, please?